Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Spiritual Connection Show. I'm your host, Katie Augustyn. So I'm an energy healer, I'm a shamanic practitioner, I'm a transformation coach, and I'm the spiritual head of the Transformation Center CT, which is located in Westport, Connecticut. So at the center, we do a variety of things. We have workshops, we have trainings, different kind of classes. Sometimes we do sound healings in the backyard. At the moment, everything is pretty much online, but who knows, that could change. And it has changed and it will change. So just check out our website. I'm going to put up the information, and all of it is right there. It's transformationcenterct.com. You can find out, there's a page with events. So every month we have satsang, which is Sanskrit for in the company of truth. And that happens on Zoom. And we also monthly have our shamanic healing clinics, which are also on Zoom. And the class that we've been having for the last several months called Spiritual Connection and Evolution, it has been in person, but it just moved to Zoom this month. So check out all of those offerings whenever you get a chance. And so for those of you who've seen the show before, you know that I'm all about connection. It's one of my core values. So what I really love to do is introduce you to my guest each week. And that way you can connect with them, find out what they're up to, who they are, and also in the process, find out more about yourself, about who you are, what resonates with you, because we're all on this spiritual journey together. And I just love sharing everything with you. So thank you for being here today. And I'm very excited to welcome my special guest today. Her name is Meena Ruchi. Welcome to the show, Meena.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I have not met Meena in person, but you're going to find out at the same time that I do everything about her. So before we get started, I'm going to put up her information, her contact info, so you can get in touch with her. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her as well. So Meena Ruchi is an Akashic Records reader. And yes, you're going to find out all about the Akashic Records in a few minutes. And she's also a meditation instructor. And, by offering a new perspective, she helps people really naturally clear their limiting beliefs. And she'll tell you more about that shortly. And she specializes in helping young professionals who feel stuck and uninspired with life. She helps them to reconnect with their potential and their gifts so they can live with more clarity, alignment, and contentment. I love the way that's expressed. So Meena has spent over a decade. She was seeking her own purpose, and then she finally was able to find it through the Akashic Records. And so that's why she finds such joy in bringing this to us, which I'm really excited about, and helping us to find greater clarity and meaning in our lives. So again, welcome to the show, Meena. Let me take down your slide and say hi.
Hi.
So Meena's tuning in from Dallas, Texas. So all of y'all in Texas, say hi. Yeah, so I like to start with the first question I ask my guests, which is, can you tell us a little bit about your spiritual journey thus far? Anything you want to share, how you got to where you are?
Yeah, for sure. So I was always kind of interested in spirituality since I was a little kid. I was drawn to anything that was kind of mysterious and magical. But I think from a very young age, I always carried very heavily on my shoulders, this question of why am I here and what's my purpose? And that longing to know the answer to that got really intense towards the end of school and throughout college. And I remember I was really struggling with anxiety, and that question was just really burning at the back of my mind all the time. And I was going through kind of a decade-long existential crisis, just wondering what I was doing here. And it was a weird feeling because everything was fine. Everything was going really well. I was doing well in my work and at school. And it was almost more infuriating that it felt like something was missing, because it was kind of like I felt guilty almost of like everything is great. Why am I not happy? And I would just be sitting there like doing my work and kind of staring at the screen and being like, this is so pointless. And it was that like deep sense of like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And it was unfulfillment. And it was, yeah, it was really intense. And it was just such an emotional ride to be carrying that. And so I eventually finished school and I was totally burnt out by the end. And even though I was like really burnt out, and I was carrying that forward. And that's kind of a scary feeling to have when you're right at the beginning of your career, to feel burnt out before you've really even started. And so it was, again, like I was so terrified and just like worried about that. But yeah, carrying that unfulfillment, that like pointless feeling with me all the time. So I made myself just take a break. It was kind of hard to stop because I had all that momentum, but I forced myself to just take 1 week to just do nothing. And in that week, I kind of stumbled upon this like class that this woman was teaching, and it was like how to read the Akashic Records. And I had heard about it sort of once before. And like I said, I've always like been kind of drawn to these kind of things as a hobby. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll like try it out. And I had tried so many different things over the years. It was like a game I was playing to try to figure out my purpose. And so I was like, oh, I'll try this. This will be like the next like little level of the game that I've been playing. And so yeah, I gave it a try, just thinking like, oh, that sounds cool. You can ask questions, get answers. Maybe I'll figure out what my purpose is. And so I took this class, and slowly over time, I was like beginning to like be able to hear the Akashic Records. And so as soon as I was able to, I would just like incessantly ask about like my purpose and why I'm here. And it took time for me to actually get an answer. And this is a little like, it's so silly like looking back on it now, but I was almost using the Akashic Records like to look for jobs, which sounds so crazy. But like I would be looking, like applying for stuff and looking at different opportunities online. And I would go to the records and be like, oh, what are the possibilities of this job at this place and this position over here? And so one time I was doing that, and I was going to ask the question, what are the possibilities of my artistic work? And I accidentally said Akashic instead of artistic. And that was, and so when I said that, I was like, what are the possibilities of my Akashic work? And I was like, oh, oops, I didn't mean that. But at that time I was getting the answer. It was so like, it was out of a movie, Katie, it was crazy. So it was like, the thing that I saw in the records was, it was like, it was all white, and it was like the clouds had parted, and it was almost like heaven's light was like shining down on me. And it was such a visceral feeling. It was so overwhelming. And I just kind of like basked in that for a minute. And it was almost like I got the sense that it was like, we've been waiting for you to ask about it, because the records don't give you any information that you don't ask about. And so I had never asked, I never even thought that I would be doing this. And so I didn't even bother to ask. It never crossed my mind. And then after that moment, I was like, oh, wow, I found it. So it was such a crazy, cool experience. And now here I am.
That is amazing, Meena, because there's no accidents. So maybe your mind didn't, ask the
Yeah.
but another part of you asked the question. Maybe your soul, asked that question because it kind of already knew. Wow, well, that's amazing, because I don't think it would have ever occurred to me to ask the question either. Like that could be your purpose, is to
Yeah.
help other people get information that can help empower them. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, that's really interesting. So then what happened after that?
So then it was kind of this like, I felt so invigorated after that. It was like I found my excitement again. And it was all also like very affirming, because I knew I was burning out on, what I was doing previously. And I was already like wanting, something different. I just didn't know that an option like that existed. And so it was like I was almost giddy. It was like so excited. It was like I received permission from the universe that I can pursue something else. And because it takes a lot to kind of like change gears like that after you spent so much time investing in a single path. And so yeah, what happened after that was I was just practicing a lot. I like honed this skill for uh for a long time. And just practicing working with the records. And then after a year or so, I began to offer it to other people once I felt like I had really kind of gotten my bearings with it.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's kind of how I began pursuing this, like doing this as work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was a natural flow once you knew that you could do it. It
Yeah.
sort of started to unfold for you. That's beautiful.
Mhm.
Well, maybe why don't we back up a little bit and you can explain like what are the Akashic records anyway?
Yeah, we did go kind of in reverse,
Yeah.
but so yeah, the Akashic records are the subtle energetic imprint of everything that has ever happened, everything that is currently happening, and everything that could possibly happen in the future. So that sounds kind of, it's a lot because it's like literally everything across time. So the way that I like to think about it and like visualize it is think of like a cosmic library, like a big invisible energetic library in space. And so, like any library, there's lots of books. And so, imagine that this library had books on every subject you could imagine, even your own soul. And so, having an Akashic record reading, if I'm reading, like if I was reading for you, it would be like I was going to the library and checking out the book on your soul. And when you do that, you're able to ask questions and receive insight or Akashic perspective, a different perspective on things that you can't really Google. So like things like, what's my purpose? What are my gifts? How can I have better relationships? And you can get really specific too, and you can ask about the potential that different possibilities carry, like the way that I did, like what are the possibilities of this work? And they won't reveal the future, and I never claim to predict the future. I don't do that at all. But they do kind of give an energetic clue as to what kind of feeling that a certain possibility or pathway might hold, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of what the records are.
Mhm, mhm. So do you get the feeling that very many people are aware of this, or is this something that is still not very well known?
um I don't think it's too well known yet. I think it's popular in some communities, but I don't think widely it's known at all.
Yeah, yeah. As I was saying before we started, I was somewhat familiar with the Akashic Records from my training as an energy healer, but I hadn't really thought about it recently. I don't use them in my day-to-day practice. So I think it's wonderful that we got to connect. So it's almost like, another little window opening over here. I'm like, oh, wow, this is something that a lot of people could benefit from. And I never actually thought about it in the way that you do it. Yeah. So how do people find you? What are they looking for when they find you?
I think when people come to me, I work with young professionals, and honestly, I've worked with like most of the people. The thing that they have in common when they receive a reading is that they feel a little bit stuck, and some of them are in the same boat that I was in. They feel uninspired and kind of like they don't know what to do, but they know that something is off. And some of them, their life looks, wonderful on the surface, and they're still unhappy. And so they can come and they can ask those questions. And by connecting them to their potential and their gifts, it's like they are reminded of the value that they have as a human being on earth, which is such a magnificent opportunity that we have. And so when they're reminded of that in this kind of like ethereal, magical way, because I do think it is kind of, it's a magical experience to have someone kind of like speak these things out to you. And that's how it felt for me, because it's like I had that inkling that what I was doing wasn't really aligned, but I needed like a little extra push, some extra like an
Mhm.
affirmation from an outside source to kind of like almost give me permission to trust what I already knew was right. And so I think
Mhm.
that's what it offers people. It helps them see these different opportunities. And one of the ways I like to describe it is like we're living our life through like a first person camera. We're looking this way, right? Through our own eyes is the only way we can see it. And in an Akashic record reading, it's almost like we're getting a bird's eye view of our own life. And so the things that we see as like problematic and not so good, it's like you're getting a zoomed out view and seeing like, oh, like if you're walking forward and there's this huge boulder in your way, you're like, oh my gosh, there's no way around it. It's such a problem. This is going to be such a drag to figure out how to get through this. But if someone's like up there from a bird's eye view saying like, oh yeah, that boulder is actually a lot smaller than you think. And, you know, there's actually 10 different routes that go around it. And there's different routes that go in a totally different direction that you hadn't even thought of. And, you know, this one leads to like this lovely vista and waterfall over here. And this one leads, you know, over to a mountain. And it just gives you things to think about and makes you realize that, oh yeah, there's infinite possibility. There's way more out there for me than I thought was possible. And that was my own experience with it for sure. Like I never thought that doing work like this was even a possibility before that moment where I accidentally asked that question. It had never occurred to me. And then after that moment, you know, it's like, yeah, it just totally changed. It's like what was possible for me shifted in a single moment because I was shown, you know, that this is actually a viable path.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. Possibilities to me are like the best thing that you can offer someone, because I think as humans, for some reason we tend to like narrow our possibilities. We
Yeah.
happens to us, and then we don't see what's out there. And like you said, just getting that different perspective, sometimes that's all it takes. And for you, that was the case. And it's almost like it's like these things have always been there. I mean, literally.
Yeah.
But also all of these possibilities have always been there for all of us. So it's like they're always there. We just don't see them. So so this just kind of gives an opportunity to illuminate what is already there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, yeah, I think you kind of have to be open-minded going into the session, I think, to get the most out of it. Because yeah, if someone doesn't want to hear it, you know, if they're kind of just having, I don't know, I think I've been there too, where it's like, I'm unhappy with the way I'm seeing things, and I also don't want to hear what anyone else has to say. It's like I don't want to hear what anyone else has to say about it. And I'm like, no, I'm right, and this is terrible. But if you are like stuck in that way of thinking, it is hard to get out of it. So I think you have to want to see the options for them to be presented to you.
No, that's a good point, because a lot of times, we get comfortable in our discomfort
Yeah, exactly.
because it's familiar and it's ours.
Yeah,
Don't tell me how to change. I think it's so interesting that the word change, it can have sort of a scary connotation, to a lot of people. And what I do a lot at my work, it's like, well, it's not necessarily about change so much. I mean, that might happen, that might result, but it's more about like we were saying, like what's possible, and what it's really about. What do you want?
yeah. What do you want, and like how willing are you to
Mm.
like kind of go for it? To hear it, to entertain that option.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you find that some people that, like you said, they're just not ready to hear it, or they're just I don't know, how would you describe?
Um, yeah, I think the people that I've read for largely are ready for it. That's why they seek it out.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think I have like in conversation with people, not when reading, but I can kind of tell like they are unhappy and they could benefit from this if they wanted it, but they just, it's not the right time for them. And they kind of, I don't know, it's almost like you have to just like be in that, like feel that stuckness, and like be present with it. And then when you're like, when it passes, when you're ready to let it go, then you can kind of be open to what else is out there and what's available. But yeah, I think some people that I've spoken to are probably just still in the midst of feeling that discomfort, like I was for like most of my life. So yeah,
Yeah.
it can be a long process.
Yeah, you can relate to that.
Definitely.
Yeah. So is there like one like main benefit that you would describe other than what we've already talked about, or is that kind of how you see it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, yeah, I think the main thing is like getting a fresh perspective and yeah, understanding what's possible. But I think in addition to all of that, because it is largely verbal, you know, I'm speaking to people when I'm reading for them. But the other thing that is present that kind of works in the background while I'm talking is that it is an energetic transmission too. And so it's like the whole time that the records are open, the keepers of the records are kind of showering like unconditional love upon you the entire time. So, and I think, you know, some people really connect to that and feel that if they're sensitive to that. But I think even if, you know, you're not really sensitive to energy or energy work, that is coming through and you are receiving it if you're open to it. And so I think
Mhm.
that's the other like profound benefit of it, is just being showered with that kind of love and compassion through the records. Is I think that can create miracles for sure, just receiving that. So I think
Mhm.
that energetic aspect of it too is really sweet.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. That's a good point because that is available. Yeah, once you open it up, that's what happens. It's like an
Yeah.
yeah, it's like a little bonus there, but whether people, like you said, whether they're aware of it explicitly or not, it's definitely a benefit. Yeah. So are you working and it works remotely as well, right?
Hmm.
Because you
Yeah.
mainly work remotely. So how does a session work? Why don't you describe that for us?
Yeah. So I do most of my readings on Zoom. And so it's largely conversational. And so the way that a session would work is I work with people one on one. And so, yeah, at the beginning of the session, I'll take a few minutes to open the records, and I do that silently. And I just come into a meditative state and I say a silent prayer to do that. And once I open the records, the client, the person I'm reading for, is able to ask questions, whatever they wish to ask. And I'm basically just like channeling the information from the records in real time. So it's like we're speaking, but I'm like just giving you the information. It's almost like I'm reading from the book for you, like
Mhm.
in the records. Instead of giving you my perspective, I'm giving you the Akashic perspective that I'm hearing. But it's not, I don't know, it's really accessible. And yeah, it's just as conversational as this is right now. But yeah, so it's basically kind of like a Q&A, and they can chat, and yeah, we can kind of dive into whatever topic they wish to. So some people have a lot to explore around relationships. So other people, it's like career and work. And yeah, some people, yeah, just like to ask about different possibilities, opportunities that they have. So you can really dive into any number of things. But yeah, it's just a conversation with the records through me as the conduit.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's very similar to channeling, ascended master or a spiritual guide or anything like that I work.
Yeah.
And it's probably the same in this field, that there's no information that comes through that is not beneficial for the person asking the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is such a critical thing to know. And I don't know if, because I think people have heard of stuff like that. And I think there's some fear around it. People are scared to um, kind of get readings because they don't want to know too much. Like they don't want to know what's going to happen or whatever. And so that's why I like to tell people it's not predicting the future. I would never claim to be able to do that. But I think that's why one of the reasons I was so drawn to the records is that it feels like a protected system. Because, I said we're going in and checking out the book, but I guess a better way to think of it is like there are librarians, there's keepers of the records, and they're making sure that you only get the information that is empowering and relevant to you at this time. So you can't really, we don't have access. There's some restricted information. We don't have access to everything we want to know. And so I always say you can ask anything you want, and we may or may not get an answer. May or may not give insight to it. And that has definitely happened many times in readings where people ask questions and they just say, no, like we can't answer that. And yeah, I think even just the other day, someone was asking about, just like a concrete thing about their future. And they were like, we can't answer that. So it's sweet. And I find like great peace in that because you can't know something that you're not supposed to know. And I've never had someone leave a reading feeling disempowered or scared, which is nice and such a relief, because that is something that I worry about. I wouldn't want someone to feel, poorly after a reading.
Yeah, no, I've had the same experience where there's no information that comes through that's not for your highest and best good, always. And if there's something, and I also firmly believe that we're not meant to know everything. None of us are.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you've maybe even had questions that you've asked that you haven't gotten an answer to either.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I remember the first time my father's best friend was a medium. This was many, many years ago. And,
Wow.
a lot of people obviously don't believe in that sort of thing. And I found it fascinating, I'm like, this is great. And she goes, no, you never get information that's not going to help you. That's just how it works. I said, okay. Because I like you said, some people are a little, have a little trepidation around that. And there's no danger whatsoever.
Yeah. It's very like permission oriented. And even the style that I read in, it's really guided by the person I'm reading for. It's like they are the ones asking the questions. I'm not just randomly getting information about them. They're asking a question and then the messages are coming. So it's nice because if there's a whole area that you just don't want to touch, it's like you just don't ask about it.
Yeah. So the client leads the session.
Yes.
We're almost out of time, but I'm going to put up your contact info again so people can contact you through either your website, which is meenaruchi.com, or email or on Instagram, all of those ways. And if there's any, like one last thing you would like to say, I think we have about 20 seconds.
I think, I just would want people to know that they have so much more potential and there's so much more available to them than they realize.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Meena, for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And I hope to connect with you again. Take care. Bye-bye.